Imagine a world where your religion alone could become your death sentence. Where every street, every train, every camp led to one destination: death. This isn't fiction, it's history. From 1933 to 1945, under the iron rule of Adolf Hitler, Germany turned hatred into law. Over 6 million Jews, along with millions of others, were murdered, not in chaos, but through a cold, calculated system built for extermination. They called it the Holocaust. But how did it happen? How did the world watch in silence while an entire population was erased? And most haunting of all, could it happen again? Today we peel back the darkest pages of human history to uncover a truth so horrifying it still shakes the soul. This is not just a story of death, it is a warning. Because what happened once can happen again.
The Holocaust was a horrifying and deliberate campaign, organized and carried out by Nazi Germany along with its allies, to target, persecute, and brutally murder 6 million innocent Jews during the dark years of World War II. This genocide, referred to in Hebrew as the Shoah, meaning catastrophe, primarily occurred between 1941 and 1945. But the systematic oppression and discrimination against Jews had already begun in 1933, right after the Nazis seized power in Germany. The Nazis identified Jews as their main targets, launching a ruthless campaign with the ultimate goal of wiping out the entire Jewish population from every corner of Europe. In addition to Jews, the Nazis also hunted down and killed other groups they considered inferior or undesirable, including the Roma, Gypsies, individuals with disabilities, Soviet prisoners of war, Poles, Jehovah's Witnesses, and many others who didn't fit their twisted vision of a pure society. The murders were executed using brutal methods like mass shootings, deliberate starvation, grueling forced labor, and the horrifying use of extermination camps, where countless victims were herded into gas chambers and killed with chilling efficiency. The Holocaust stands as one of the darkest and most horrifying genocides in human history, where nearly 2/3 of the entire Jewish population in Europe was systematically hunted down and murdered. The Holocaust came to an end in 1945 with the fall of Nazi Germany, but its deep scars and haunting legacy continue to shape global conversations about human rights, justice, and the horrors of genocide, even to this day. 6 million Jews? How did that even happen under everyone's watch? The brutal murder of 6 million Jews during the Holocaust was not a random act of violence, but the result of a chillingly organized and state-sponsored campaign. This atrocity unfolded through a combination of meticulous planning, secrecy, widespread propaganda, and the complicity or sheer indifference of much of the global community. Nazi Germany, fueled by its deeply ingrained anti-Semitism, harnessed its state machinery to systematically target Jews, isolating them from society, stripping them of their rights, and ultimately seeking their complete annihilation across Europe from 1941 to 1945. With every step, the Nazis employed ruthless methods of control and deception, creating a climate of fear and silence that allowed these horrors to unfold largely unchecked by the rest of the world. The Nazis built a vast system of concentration camps and extermination centers like Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Sobibor, where millions were killed. These camps were places of unimaginable horror, where innocent lives were extinguished in the most brutal ways, Victims were primarily killed by poison gas in gas chambers, while others were executed through mass shootings, with each death becoming a part of the monstrous machinery of genocide the Nazis had set in motion. Jews were also subjected to horrific deaths through starvation, forced labor, the deliberate denial of medical care, and countless other brutal methods. They were worked to the point of exhaustion in labor camps, where many died from the grueling conditions. Others perished from the lack of basic necessities, as food was scarce and disease ran rampant. The Nazis used every means available to torture their victims, ensuring that their suffering was prolonged and merciless. Stripping them of any hope for survival, the Nazis and their collaborators went to great lengths to keep the scale of the genocide hidden from the outside world. They employed coded language in their communications, deliberately obscuring the true nature of their operations. As the war came to a close, they destroyed crucial evidence of their crimes, burning documents, dismantling camps, and executing prisoners to ensure that the full extent of the horrors would remain concealed. Despite these efforts, the truth began to emerge as the Allies liberated the camps, revealing the unspeakable atrocities that had taken place. Many countries preoccupied with the devastation of the war or influenced by deeply entrenched anti-Semitic attitudes failed to take decisive action to halt the genocide. Even when reports of atrocities began to surface, much of the world remained passive or indifferent, allowing the Nazis to carry out their horrific plans largely unchecked. It wasn't until after the war ended that the true scale of the killings came to light, as the full extent of the Holocaust was slowly uncovered through testimonies, documents, and the liberation of concentration camps. The Holocaust stands as one of history's most thoroughly documented genocides, with an overwhelming amount of evidence supporting its horrific scale. Nazi records, survivor testimonies, and demographic studies all contribute to an undeniable body of proof that confirms the sheer magnitude of the atrocity. These sources offer a chilling and detailed account of the systematic persecution, illustrating the organized nature of the genocide and the depth of the suffering endured by millions. The vastness of the evidence makes it impossible to deny or forget the dark reality of the Holocaust. Was it only Jews who was killed, or were other people also victims? Jews were the primary victims of the Holocaust, but the Nazis also targeted and brutally persecuted many other groups, each suffering unimaginable horrors under their reign of terror. The Nazis aimed to eliminate or suppress anyone who did not conform to their twisted vision of a pure Aryan race, or anyone who opposed their oppressive regime. This included Roma, Gypsies, disabled individuals, Soviet prisoners of war, Poles, political dissidents, Jehovah's Witnesses, and many others who were deemed undesirable. The regime's ideology was rooted in a deeply racist worldview, and anyone who fell outside their narrow, bigoted definition of worth was subjected to torture, forced labor, and ultimately mass murder. Other victimized groups included Roma and Sinti, Gypsies, Black people in Germany, people with disabilities, physically and mentally, Poles and other Slavic peoples, Jehovah's Witnesses, homosexuals, political opponents such as communists and trade unionists, Soviet prisoners of war. Millions from these targeted groups were imprisoned, forcibly sterilized, murdered, or subjected to other forms of brutal persecution. While Jews were singled out for total annihilation, the suffering endured by these other groups was equally immense and cannot be overlooked. The horrors they faced, whether through forced labor, medical experimentation, or extermination, were just as devastating. Over time, the recognition of the suffering of these groups has grown, acknowledging that their tragic fates were deeply intertwined with the broader catastrophe of the Holocaust. contributing to the full scope of its horrific impact. Gas chambers, mass shootings, what kind of torture was this? The Nazis employed some of the most horrific methods of torture and murder during the Holocaust, with the primary means being gas chambers and mass shootings. Victims were crammed into gas chambers, where they were killed with lethal poison gas, often in groups, in a systematic and industrial manner. For those outside the camps, mass shootings were a brutal method used by Einsatzgruppen, mobile death squads, who executed tens of thousands of people in cold blood. These methods were not just ways to kill, but a cruel and calculated effort to dehumanize and destroy entire populations. Victims were often deceived into thinking they were being taken for a shower, a chilling tactic used to maintain order and avoid panic. Instead, they were herded into airtight chambers, where they were locked in and exposed to poisonous gases like Zyklon B or carbon monoxide. Within minutes, the victims would succumb to suffocation, their bodies collapsing in a grim display of the Nazis' cold, calculated efficiency in carrying out mass murder. This method was designed to be swift and horrifyingly impersonal, stripping away any sense of humanity from the atrocity. Gas chambers were meticulously designed for mass execution, allowing the Nazis to kill large numbers of people with terrifying efficiency. Victims were packed tightly inside these sealed chambers, often suffocating within minutes as the lethal gas was released. Once the victims had been killed, their bodies were swiftly removed and burned in crematoria, an effort to destroy all evidence of the horrific crimes. This systematic approach not only aimed to maximize the number of deaths, but also to conceal the scale of the atrocities, making it harder for the world to uncover the full extent of the genocide. The Nazis disguised these chambers to deceive victims, making them believe they were going for a shower or disinfection. The chambers were designed to look like ordinary shower rooms, hiding their true purpose and ensuring that victims would enter without suspicion. This deception helped the Nazis maintain control and avoid panic, while also keeping the atrocities hidden from the outside world. Early in the Holocaust, particularly in Eastern Europe, Nazi mobile killing units known as Einsatzgruppen carried out mass shootings of Jews and other victims. The victims were often forced to dig their own graves before being executed, adding a horrifying level of humiliation to the brutality. These mass shootings took place in fields, forests, and other remote areas where victims were lined up and shot in cold blood, their bodies left to rot in the open as a testament to the Nazis' unrelenting cruelty. In some camps like Mauthausen, prisoners were executed by shooting, with methods designed to expedite the killing process. One such method involved shooting victims in the back of the neck, a swift and brutal tactic to ensure death. These executions were carried out with chilling efficiency, as the Nazis sought to eliminate prisoners quickly, often without any form of trial or justification. The executions were cold and calculated, further stripping the victims of their humanity, as they were reduced to mere numbers in the Nazis' horrific system. Prisoners endured relentless beatings, starvation, and forced labor, often referred to as extermination through work, where they were worked to death in grueling conditions. Along with this, they faced severe medical neglect, leaving many to die from preventable illnesses. They were subjected to freezing temperatures, hung as punishment or for mere sport, and killed randomly without any cause or warning. These methods of torture and death were designed not only to break their bodies, but to crush their spirits, leaving them with little hope for survival. In some camps, poison injections and epidemics were also used to kill prisoners. Prisoners were injected with poison, and in some cases they were left to suffer from diseases spread by the Nazis, who did nothing to stop the epidemics. These methods combined to create a brutal system of industrialized murder and torture, where death was executed with chilling efficiency. The systematic use of gas chambers, mass shootings, starvation, forced labor, and medical neglect contributed to the annihilation of millions during the Holocaust. What was happening between 1933 and 1941? Was this all being planned from the beginning? Between 1933 and 1941, the Nazis built the foundation for the Holocaust through escalating laws, violence, and discrimination against Jews and other targeted groups. However, the full-scale mass murder, known as the final solution, had not yet begun. Instead, the regime focused on isolating and dehumanizing victims, laying the groundwork for the horrific genocide that would unfold in the following years. In 1933, Hitler became Chancellor, marking the beginning of widespread oppression. Civil liberties were severely restricted, and the first concentration camp, Dachau, was opened to imprison political opponents and other undesirables. Jews were systematically removed from government positions, and Jewish businesses were targeted with boycotts, signaling the Nazis' growing campaign of discrimination and exclusion. This was just the beginning of their relentless pursuit to isolate and persecute the Jewish population. In 1935, the Nuremberg Laws were enacted, stripping Jews of their citizenship and basic rights, officially institutionalizing racial discrimination. These laws not only targeted Jews but also persecuted other marginalized groups, including Roma, Jehovah's Witnesses, and homosexuals. They were subjected to similar discriminatory measures, further isolating them from society and setting the stage for even more severe oppression in the years to come. In 1938, Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass, marked a violent state-sponsored attack on Jews, their synagogues, and businesses. This brutal event saw the widespread destruction of Jewish property, with windows shattered and buildings set on fire. The violence was orchestrated by the Nazis and marked a sharp escalation in the persecution of Jews, signaling the beginning of more extreme measures that would lead to the horrors of the Holocaust. In 1939, Germany invaded Poland, marking the beginning of World War II. In the wake of the invasion, Jews were forcibly relocated to overcrowded ghettos, where they faced appalling living conditions. At the same time, the Nazis began the systematic murder of people with disabilities, targeting them under the guise of euthanasia. This marked the start of the Nazis' widespread program of extermination, which would expand throughout Europe during the war. In 1940 to 1941, Jews across Europe were forcibly relocated to ghettos and camps, where they endured horrific conditions. During this time, the first mass shootings by mobile killing units, known as Einsatzgruppen, began, executing thousands of Jews and others in cold blood. In late 1941, the first death camp, Chelmno, started operating, where victims were killed in gas vans, marking the beginning of the Nazis' industrialized system of mass murder. The Nazis' anti-Semitic ideology and persecution were clear from the start, but the organized, industrial-scale extermination was developed over time. The groundwork was laid through laws, propaganda, and violence, gradually isolating and dehumanizing Jews and other groups. The decision for systematic mass murder, the final solution, was formalized in 1942, but the path to genocide was paved by years of escalating oppression and brutality. But why didn't people resist? Did anyone try to stop Hitler? Many people did try to resist Hitler and the Nazis, but resistance was extremely dangerous and often brutally crushed. The Nazi regime used fear, propaganda, and violence to control the population, making organized opposition very difficult. Some Germans and Jews engaged in sabotage, smuggled information to the Allies, distributed anti-Nazi leaflets, and helped people escape. Armed Jewish resistance occurred in over 100 ghettos and even in camps like Treblinka, Sobibor, and Auschwitz. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising was a major example, where fighters held off German troops for nearly a month. Youth groups like the White Rose and Edelweiss Pirates protested Nazi policies, distributed leaflets, and even carried out acts of violence against Nazi officials. Political opponents, church leaders, and ordinary citizens also resisted in various ways, from strikes and protests to hiding Jews and warning people of arrests. Despite these efforts, resistance was fragmented and dangerous. Many resistors were executed or sent to camps. Most Germans did not resist, either out of fear, agreement with Nazi policies, or a sense of powerlessness. But how did these camps operate? What was the scale of all this? Nazi camps operated as brutal centers of imprisonment, forced labor, and mass murder, run by the SS with a strict hierarchy and harsh daily routines designed to break prisoners physically and mentally. Each camp was headed by a Lagerkommandant, camp commander, supported by SS officers and guards. Prisoners were organized under prisoner supervisors called kapos, who often enforced discipline harshly. As prisoners endured early wake-ups, long roll calls, appel, often lasting hours in all weather, followed by exhausting forced labor for 12 to 14 hours under threat of beatings or death. Meals were meager, usually watery soup and a small piece of bread insufficient for the hard labor demanded. Prisoners lived in overcrowded, unsanitary barracks or tents with little to no bedding or clothing. Starvation, disease, and exposure were rampant, and medical care was minimal or non-existent. Severely ill prisoners were often executed or left to die. The SS routinely inflicted physical abuse, random executions, and psychological terror. Roll calls were used to punish and humiliate prisoners, sometimes lasting up to 10 hours. Attempts to escape or resistance led to collective punishment or immediate death. Some camps combined forced labor with extermination. Selected prisoners worked sorting belongings of victims or in factories but faced death from exhaustion or execution. Extermination camps had gas chambers and crematoria to murder large numbers efficiently, such as Auschwitz-Birkenau, where about 1.1 million people were killed in gas chambers alone. The Nazi camp system included concentration camps, forced labor camps, and extermination camps spread across occupied Europe, with networks of satellite camps supporting larger complexes like Auschwitz. Millions were imprisoned, and millions died due to murder, starvation, disease, and exhaustion. The camps were central to the Nazis' genocidal policies, systematically killing 6 million Jews and millions of others. In summary, the camps were industrialized centers of cruelty designed to exploit, dehumanize, and exterminate prisoners on a massive scale. It's all over now, but what relevance does it have in today's world? 80 years after the liberation of Auschwitz, the Holocaust remains deeply relevant as both a warning and a guide for the present and future. Its remembrance is not just about honoring victims. It is a powerful tool to defend human rights, fight hatred, and promote dignity for all. The Holocaust showed the catastrophic consequences when hatred, dehumanization, and indifference go unchecked. Remembering it strengthens our resolve to protect human rights and dignity everywhere. Holocaust education helps people recognize the warning signs of prejudice, discrimination, and propaganda, making societies more resilient against future atrocities. With anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial still present, remembrance is a defense against those who seek to erase or rewrite history. Survivor stories foster empathy and remind us that hate and division can grow if left unchallenged. Remembrance calls us to act against all forms of hatred, not just anti-Semitism. Events like International Holocaust Remembrance Day, January 27th, unite people worldwide to reflect, learn, and recommit to preventing such horrors from happening again. In a world where hate crimes, discrimination, and genocide still occur, the lessons of the Holocaust are a vital bulwark against the denigration of humanity and a call to collective action for justice and peace. How was all of this hidden from the world for so long? The Holocaust was hidden from the wider world for several reasons involving Nazi secrecy, deception, propaganda, and the limitations of communication during wartime. The Nazis deliberately concealed the true nature of extermination camps by using euphemisms like special treatment, resettlement, or evacuation in internal communications, masking mass murder as administrative actions. Extermination camps were kept strictly secret, unlike concentration camps which were publicly known but portrayed as re-education sites. Victims were often deceived into believing they were going for showers or delousing, with gas chambers disguised as shower rooms to prevent panic and resistance. The concentration camp system operated outside normal legal oversight, controlled solely by the SS, which ensured that reports of killings were falsified as suicides, accidents, or justified executions. Prisoners were isolated and external contact was limited. Nazi propaganda demonized prisoners as criminals and enemies of the state, which reduced public sympathy and justified harsh treatment. Many Germans saw camps as necessary and accepted their existence, often out of fear or agreement with Nazi ideology. The chaos of World War II, censorship, and limited access to occupied territories made it difficult for outsiders to gather reliable information. Although some reports and rumors circulated, the full-scale and systematic nature of the genocide were not widely understood until after the war. As the war turned against Germany, the Nazis attempted to dismantle camps, destroy records, and exhume mass graves to hide evidence of their crimes. Together, these factors allowed the Nazis to carry out the Holocaust largely hidden from the global community until Allied forces liberated the camps in 1944 to 1945 and exposed the full extent of the atrocities. So, that was a brief overview of the Holocaust, but if you're craving more suspenseful and shocking stories, don't forget to check out my other video on Robert Hanssen. I'll take you through how an FBI agent turned into a traitor against his own country. Click on the video about Robert Hanssen right here on the screen. Don't miss it.